The year is 2018, and I am sitting behind my big cherry desk in a senior living community with executive director on the door. And a phone call comes in. I answer it, and it's Margaret. And she tells me that her mom was living at home, had fallen, was in rehab, and she got a call from the rehab center that day that her mom's time was up there and she had 48 hours to find 24-hour care for her mom. And her first question to me was, "Do you all take United Healthcare?"
Mm.
And not only did I have to tell Margaret that we were assisted living, we were private pay, but depending on her mom's needs, it could be up to $10,000 a month. And the silence on the other end of the line was very evident. And Margaret proceeded to tell me she had no idea how much money her mom had and that she really was unsure of how to move forward. And I would love to say that this situation, that was a one-time situation, but as the executive director in senior living for 20 years, we probably got one of those phone calls at least once a week. And most people, when I tell this story, think, oh, how sad for Margaret that she's got to figure this out. But really, her mom, Sharon, was the one that really always struck me because Sharon had lost all control. She had no idea what her options were. She was at the mercy of Margaret, figuring out what her next phase of life was going to look like. And that's what has motivated me to this day.
Well, hello, this is Gina
And this is Don.
with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 164, and today we have the privilege of talking with Allison O'Shea. She's the founder of Openly Aging, an aging consultant, speaker, and author of Openly Aging, and the author of the book, Openly Aging, Four Pillars to Keep Control of Your Aging Journey. Allison O'Shea is a nationally recognized aging consultant, speaker, and the author of the book. She's had over 20 years of experience as a senior living executive. She's witnessed thousands of aging journeys, both the ones that have gone smoothly and the ones that didn't. Through one-on-one consultations, she empowers individuals to take control of their future by understanding their options, identifying their goals and desires, and making informed decisions that align with their needs and budget. As author of The Four Pillars to Keep Control of Your Aging Journey, Allison is passionate about shifting the narrative around aging from fear and uncertainty to empowerment and opportunity. She believes that by embracing aging with intention and knowledge, people can maintain control, independence, and a high quality of life for years to come. Welcome, Allison. And I love that part of your bio about shifting from fear to making informed, intentional decisions.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
um, what you do just goes so much in line with everything that Don and I talk about. Really, our focus on this podcast, talking about caring for aging loved ones. But I love how your book is written for the aging person themselves. And you mentioned in your story there, the person who is at the mercy of their children or whoever it is that's having to step in and do things. And so I just love that the book puts it into, that person's like, you need to be thinking about this now because otherwise down the future, decisions are going to be made for you.
100%. I feel like we have a lot of conversations about retirement. We're golfing, we're traveling, we're doing all the fun stuff, but we neglect to actually think about that post-retirement time where maybe we are slowing down, or maybe medical concerns arise, or we do get a diagnosis of some cognitive decline or neurological disorder. And we've never really had any conversations. And I feel like as aging individuals, it's our responsibility as well to put ourselves in control, in the driver's seat.
Sure. Yes, Don and I, we do this work and we've helped my mom. My dad passed in the fall, but we had navigated helping get care for him. and sitting here with each other, like, we need to think about this for ourselves too now, because
Don't really want to do that, but that's what, that, yeah.
we joke about our oldest child. He's doing pretty well for himself in the world and moving up. And I'm like, you're just going to take care of us.
And every time you say that, he's like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah.
Move a little further away from us.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, what's sad is that, that we were talking about it, but that people just don't want to talk about it. I mean, I think it's getting a little freer up, but it just seems to be like taboo almost to talk about it.
Well, I think too, the generation that's in their 90s and above, which is a lot of the parents of, the baby boom, they didn't talk about it because their options were very limited. You went to quote unquote the home when you couldn't take care of yourself, or your family took care of you at home, even if it was a huge burden and it didn't matter, you just did that. But we're moving into a generation of aging individuals who have a lot of options, who their children are also part of another generation that's not going to move you into their home, or that's kind of a last resort,
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's just, and there's so much unpredictability with aging that if we can really have great conversations about what we can predict or what we can control now, it just takes away the crisis in those unpredictable times.
Well, I love that, that there was a part in there about age. I think you called it ageism,
Yes,
and
yes.
what's really interesting about it, I mean, I ran into that myself. I mean, when I hit about 50, I guess it was, I think I was looking for a job, and putting out all this information and not getting, I don't think I got anybody to respond on it. It was really kind of scary in a way. It's like, and I'm putting on it that it was about ageism, but I really do think it is. I mean, I don't think that's a lie. So you can talk a little bit more about that too, as how
Yeah.
you.
So when I was researching my book, some of the important facts are that in 1900, only 100,000 people were 85 plus. By 2050, they are predicting 50 million people to be 85 plus, or excuse me, 19 million
Wow.
to be 85 plus.
Yeah.
85 plus is the fastest growing age group right now. So the
Mhm.
likelihood of most of us living to be 85 is really high. But 60% of people over the age of 85 need some sort of support for functional limitations. And this is not the scary stuff, the bathing, the toileting, all those words. This is who goes and, takes you to the doctor if you're having, not feeling well, or picking up a prescription, or just being there, in case of emergency. And I think that, when I was researching the book and I was learning all about that, I saw a lot of articles on ageism and how people in my age group, how we cannot be ageist. And it really got me thinking about, well, what's the responsibility of the aging individual to put themselves in a situation that makes sense, that they understand what their options are, they've been thoughtful about what their goals and desires are, they're not being resistant, they're listening to their adult children or loved ones saying, hey, we're nervous about this, we have concerns about this. Because that is what ageism is looking down on a group of people because they are weak, dependent, and not making good decisions. And so if we start making good decisions, being thoughtful, being intentional, that will automatically reverse that narrative of, as we age, we're not capable enough. And it is our responsibility as we age to help ward off that stigma.
Well, and think about it, and when we get to this age, we do have a lot of wisdom, which,
Mhm.
but we don't want to, we at some point kind of turn it off and say that, it's not worth it, or not, so yeah, that, I don't know,
Or
that just made.
awareness. I think it's also a lot of times we have a hard time becoming aware of what aging issues could arise, or what we may
Mhm.
already be kind of going through, and we don't want to admit it, because the other problem in our society is this goal of youthfulness, which is kind of
That was
ridiculous
so
because I'm
powerful.
older now than when
Right.
we started this conversation. So we can't like get more, younger. And so we have to embrace the fact that we're getting older and we can't stop it. And we will be 85 at some point. And so, yeah, I think it's all involved in self-awareness, empowerment, and just saying, you know what? I never thought I'd be listening to a podcast about, what am I going to do when I'm 75? But here I am. And you've got to embrace it with intention.
Yeah. You make such a big point there. Um, our culture is so focused on youth, and that's why people don't talk about getting older, because it's all about young. I was working somewhere recently, and someone said about a coworker, "Oh, she doesn't talk about her age." And this woman's probably my age. I'm in my
Yeah.
50s, and it's like I have no problem talking about my age.
Yeah.
But just that idea, that perpetuates, got to look younger, stay
Well,
fit,
there's
stay
shame. There's a
healthy.
lot of
Yeah.
shame involved with aging, which is also really sad to me because we can't help our age. We can't help, some of the things we go through. For some people that unfortunately end up with a diagnosis of a cognitive decline, they didn't ask for it. They didn't,
Yeah.
but we have to acknowledge that it happened, and we can be we can ward off all the terrible stories we hear about cognitive decline. The more as soon as we're diagnosed, we put a plan in place, we acknowledge it, we tell people, we speak on it. We're not proud of it, but we're not ashamed of it. We can just embrace it and do what we need to do to be the best in that moment that we can be.
Well, I found it, I was looking at the different pillars, and the one that kind of stuck out that I think I get it, but I kind of want to, is the intentional social engagement. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that because, I understand we saw it in her father, the COVID thing when that hit,
Mm.
everything shut down and they didn't have the same kind of um, people that dealt with and stuff like that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I actually got my degree in something called therapeutic recreation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I spent 4 years basically learning about the importance of recreation, the importance of social engagement. It's a very big core pillar of my being. But, COVID, yes, COVID was terrible. That was a moment in time. Those people, like many other age groups throughout COVID, were affected very differently than maybe others, and so we kind of put that off as a one time. But for most people, understanding how you socially engage is one of the most important things you can do as you age. Because as we age, naturally our world gets a little smaller. And so if we're intentional about putting ourselves in a position where our social engagement isn't as affected as we decline, as it would be if we just didn't think about it. For example, I always say, to clients of mine, what happens when you can't drive, or when
Mm-hmm.
that time comes? Is the position you're in now, where you're living, how you're socializing now, would that be completely affected? And, for many people, yes. So that's a conversation starter. But knowing how important other people are. For example, some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. And, I always tell people, I don't want to hear you're an introverted extrovert. It's on a spectrum. You either fall somewhere in there. But understanding that for the super extroverts that are listening today, who love people, who get energy from people, you aging at home alone is not really in your best interest.
Mm.
But if you want to make that choice, it's all about choices and being educated in our choices. I always tell people that's your right. Just know that that is going to be something that will affect how you age in a negative
Mm-hmm.
way, um, and so being intentional, are you a social recreator? Are you a purposeful recreator? There's different kinds, Don, I'll speak to a lot of men. They end up working a really long time, for some people, way past when maybe they should have retired, because they're purposeful recreators and they're getting their recreation from whatever position they have. And so I tell people, if you know that you're a purposeful recreator and you're having a hard time leaving a job or, whatever, there's boards that you could join after you retire. Know that you're a purposeful recreator and seek out how to continue to use that type of recreation in your aging journey. For the social recreators, they love a book club, the events, they're going to arise. And that's great. Get yourself involved. And so just knowing how you recreate, what brings you joy, needs to be very thought out as we're making plans for the future.
Well, we talked about that. We interviewed a person that was in a independent living. She was the marketer of it, and she was talking about the idea. We never really think about the fact that, like you say, things shrink as you get older, and coming into an independent living or a community like that gives you that ability to regain or get your social self together.
100%.
You know.
But I also tell people it doesn't have to be a community. I always use my parents as an example because they're doing, retirement, I think, in a great way. They moved to this little town. It's like everyone there is retired. They live on this street with all these. I mean, every time I go, there's a party at somebody else's house that we've got to go to for dinner, And so they all just look after each other. They protect each other. And they are just living it up. So it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, if I'm an
Mhm.
introvert or an extrovert, I need to move to senior living. I think that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is where we get stuck, is we assume it's our home where we currently are or senior living. And there's so many options in between that you are there for you. You just have to know about them. You have to understand how best to get out of it. Um, and so I think that sometimes a misnomer is that it's like one or the other, and that's just
Oh,
not
that's true.
true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, there are different options, and people, aren't aware of that, the location of where they live to, my parents lived in a 55 plus community for quite some time.
Yeah.
And my father had Parkinson's, and my mom became his caregiver, and it became a lot on her. And we helped move him out more for her because it
Hmm.
was, it was a lot on her. And then she gets to have a life now. My father passed away in the fall, and she lives in a continuous care retirement community, and she's in independent living, and she's
Yeah.
like having fun like she's a college student again. She has her own apartment, she gets to go to meals with people, she goes on
Yeah.
outings and activities, and it kind of all came about really quickly. Donna and I, we moved an hour and a half from where they were living, kind of because that's where circumstances brought us. And so we moved my dad up here and then her up here, but it's kind of all worked out beautifully that the
Hmm.
community is really close to our house, and now she's got this whole new life that where she's can age in place, and if she needs extra support and help, it's there, and it kind of worked out nice for her, probably nicer for her than my dad his journey.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like
But I
we
also
don't
think it's
always.
important to note a community isn't for everyone, and
Hmm.
that's also okay. But you
Hmm.
need to be thoughtful about that, and you need to put plans in place around where you plan on aging that initiate the social interaction. So, yes, I always hear stories, this I moved in and it was great, and I worked in senior living for 20 years. I believe in
Hmm.
senior living, but I also believe it's not for everyone. But you
Sure.
should know that as an individual, if
Sure.
that is going to be an environment that you want.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm myself. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've worked in a
Oh, okay.
variety of communities, from assisted independent livings to skilled nursing facilities, did home health care. So yeah, and you see such a variety of people and how they approach it, but it often happens because a crisis happens,
Mhm.
and that you describe, I think, in the book, all of a sudden you've got, and the story you told, I mean, that
Mhm.
happens so often. I've had family members look at me, and when funding's an issue, that's the big challenge is,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
what am I supposed to do? And someone said to me, what would you do? And
Yeah.
um,
And that's another good point. We should know if our funding is going to be an issue. There is no reason we can't know 10 years before we may potentially need assisted living, whether our funding is going to be an issue. And so many people don't even know how their finances relate to aging. They just
Mm-hmm.
have no idea. And then they get in a situation where either they make I had one resident one time spent down all of her money in our community. Family just assumed she would be able to get, state assistance, Medicaid, whatever, and she made $40 too much.
Mm-hmm.
And now this family was stuck. And if they had really talked to somebody years ahead to understand what their options were, how best to prepare for their options, they could
Mm-hmm.
have avoided a lot of that stress.
Do you work with other like financial planners and things like that in helping people to get ahead to make that journey?
Yeah, so I actually get a lot of referrals from financial advisors. I do a lot of speaking at financial advisor firms for their resident or their clients,
Mm-hmm.
because of course they lay the framework, hey,
Mm-hmm.
here's all your money. We're going to grow it. We're going to do what we can. But once it gets into somebody having to really make some of these big decisions, a good financial advisor will realize that they really don't understand the total nuances of the aging. I mean, just as as an occupational therapist, like there's a lot that goes into aging and the services and the resources. And so a good financial advisor will say, okay, I've made sure you have this nest egg. We know that you can afford these options, but let me now send you to somebody who can actually sit with you, identify your goals, see what's going on with you, and really help you know which option is going to be best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the work hand in hand. I know we found the place for my mom, and she took the numbers to her financial planner to
Yes.
help figure out because there were different buy-in options in the community, and yeah, to kind of help figure it out because she's great at day to day, um, you know, covering expenses and looking at it monthly, but this whole big picture, like they have this large nest egg that they've saved up for, but what does that look like? She's 80.
Right.
How long
And
is
do
she
you
going to
find
live?
value in giving it to a continuing care retirement community, or does that
Hmm.
make you too nervous? And then what are the other options if you don't want that type of senior living? And
Hmm.
so, you know, weighing all that out.
And the big unpredictable factor is how long you're going to live. you know,
Mhm.
um, we moved my dad. He needed memory
And not
care.
how long, how healthy
Yeah,
you're going
that's
to.
true.
Well, that's
That's true.
true.
Yes, because it
There's a
can,
big
like
difference between, yeah. Go
my
ahead.
dad was put in memory care, and my mom, we started paying for additional caregivers to come in. And, you know, he only lived a couple months in that situation, but yeah, there's a lot of unknown going on there. And yeah, and how healthy you live, obviously, the more um, issues you have with your health, the more services you're going to need, and obviously the more expense. But
Yeah, with Gina and I, a big area we try to work on is communication, and getting people. Well, like you said, talking right up front is a big part of it, but also, how you talk to the caregivers, how you talk to the care the s- professional caregivers as well as the home caregivers, how you speak to that whole gambit is what we try to
Yeah,
kind of
one of
come on
my
to.
biggest Yeah, one of my biggest things I tell people is there's a lot of unmet expectations between the consumers and the services. And that is just lack of communication. But a lot of times you're also looking at big like differences in cultures, demographics. So,
mhm,
if your mom is living in a continuing care, she obviously had the funds to do it and then pay
mhm,
for your dad for that time. So that, she is of a group of people that's able to afford that. Well, a lot of the people that are working in these communities, aren't in that position. And so there can be a lot of differences between expectation of service and what's actually delivered just from a lack of communication, lack of understanding each other's worlds. And
mhm,
so I do help families say, okay, when mom's moving into this community, you need to expect here's how to get the best out of associates who want to do the best job. They get a bad rap sometimes, and I hate that because a lot of times it's just unmet expectations and things that they just don't know that are expected of them from a
mm,
consumer.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Like Don was saying, yeah, the communication part of it. understanding that and understanding the different perspectives of where people are coming from. I know there's a facility in Charlotte I work at, and a lot of the caregivers are from other countries. And so cultural differences
Mhm. Huge.
can can play a big part. You know, we're talking about the nursing assistants who have the direct hands-on care, and yeah, so understanding that, and like I love finding out what people did for a living, because to me that tells a whole lot about their interests, their personality, and it and how I approach them can be very different
Mhm.
than someone of a different background. But yeah, helping people to look at the other side of the situation too, to know.
Well, and there's so
Yeah.
much complexity with, like her father had Parkinson's and dementia, but the next person, it might be dementia with something else, or so it's that becomes very complex too, to be able to talk through that
Mhm.
and have the staff understand that, and then,
Yep. Yep.
So I'm curious how you decided to put your book together, kind of if there were certain situations that kind of led you to putting the book together.
Yeah, how I created the pillars is when I sat back and, was starting openly aging and really kind of identifying what I wanted to do. Because I was trying to do something a little different. I'm sure you all are aware of there's, profession geriatric care manager, which are wonderful, individuals who have there's a real need for them and they're more boots on the ground. And when I first started, people were kind of putting me in that bucket, and I was really having a hard time kind of identifying, no, I'm more strategy, I'm more big picture, I'm more, long term. And so when I sat back to say, okay, who am I helping or how can I help people strategize for the future? Every crisis that I have come across in my career, one of those pillars was either broken, not working, or wasn't thought out for the people I came across. There was something that just had broke essentially. And now they were forced to make this decision that for many of them, they came in kicking and screaming, didn't want to be there, weren't happy that their, children or whoever was saying, hey, you got to move to assisted living. Um, and so I saw a lot of aging people that were sad, resentful, just not living that chapter of their life with contentment and gratitude and just, hey, making the best of it, if you will. And so the four pillars to me really identify if we are just thoughtful about those four areas as we age, they really cover everything that may come our way. And we just, if to put a framework around it, can help people just have better conversations and just be thoughtful and become a little more self aware.
Yeah. I love that you said you speak at some financial seminars, because it's a great, I think, tie in. Like, okay, you're thinking about the future with your money. What about,
Mhm.
where you're going to live and how you're going to live? And what if you need help? And, to get people to buy into that, because they will talk about money oftentimes and the future, but we don't think about these other things. Yeah,
well, I think we're trained probably from very small that you go to school, you get a job, and the job becomes your life more than anything else. And
it's
so
true.
you talk about the leisure and the recreation, that becomes like a very, very second kind of thing. We do that maybe once a year, or and then as soon as we get done, we got to go back to work, and work becomes too heavy for us in a way, and we can't kind of let go of it at some point.
Well, because I want to kind of actually put that back and say, because for some people, work is without them knowing is a little bit of a leisure for them. It's giving them
Oh yeah.
purpose. It's giving them, and that's what leisure is. It's where am I finding purpose? Where am I
Hmm.
finding where I can, be my best version or feel the best, feel in control. And that is a part of leisure is
Sure,
having those feelings. It's just the work side of leisure.
sure.
And for
Well,
some
it's
others, they are ready to retire and they're done with it, and those, and they're good. And they get that, their work is not necessarily their leisure. But for some
Well, I think
others,
it's one of those things where the people that tell you you can go to work or you can go to some place that you enjoy working,
yes.
and I think that could be a little bit of a play too. If it's something you really enjoy, then yeah, it can be very much a leisure or
Yep.
a pastime. But
It
And I
kind of
think
makes
that's too with the generations to come. They are
sure.
finding more purpose in their work. They're doing, even me starting openly aging, I don't ever have to retire from this if I, until because it's become, part of who I am and my, purpose. And I think generations to come are learning to put work as more of their passion, whereas the older generations, that you're 100% correct. It was you provide for the family, you go to work, you do whatever, So,
And talking about longevity, I mean, people they didn't used to live to retire,
no.
and have much time for that. I've been a therapist 30 years and I've seen a huge shift in, like you said, that people are living to 85. And someone who comes to me and says, I'm 80 years old. It's like, yeah, this lady's 95. Like
Right.
I think they're really old. But it is true. I get that sense just from when I work places that 85 is kind of the average age now.
Mhm.
Um, that I see, but people didn't have, there was a shift or whatever that happened as far as that. So I know you've touched on some of the four pillars, just to kind of go over those again.
Yeah. So the first pillar is support system. And that is just identifying who are those people that are going to be there during those times when you may need support. And you may have a great social group. I always say this when I do my talks but if you look around and everyone's your same age, even though that's great and keep going, what's the common denominator there? So, this is really people. A lot of times it's adult children or adult nieces and nephews. But for some people, they can't identify who their aging support system will be, and that's okay. But those are the people that need to get educated on a professional support system. Those are the geriatric care managers I talked about, the patient advocates, a community is technically a professional support system because it has all those things. But right now in our world, people get connected with professional support systems because of a crisis, or all of a sudden, oh my gosh, something is happening. We should know years ahead that a professional support system could potentially be in our future just because of our circumstance. We should know how much it costs. We should know how best to use it. And do you know what it also does? It opens our eyes and ears. And now all of a sudden, when you hear your friend talk about how her mom, they got her a geriatric care manager because she doesn't live near them, you're going to say, "Oh, how is that going? Tell me a little bit more." It just kind of opens your world up to hearing about that role, learning about that role. And so when the time comes where maybe it's time to implement that role, you're educated. You're an educated consumer, and now you know where to go to find the best person, or you already know your neighbor down the street has somebody and you've liked them, you've met them, and it's an easy introduction to a service. And we also need to introduce services sooner than later. We wait and wait, and that's a whole other conversation for a different pillar. But under support system is knowing if you need a professional, but also how do your finances relate to aging?
Mhm.
Knowing, what you can afford, you can't afford. Do you have a long-term care policy? Do you understand it? Would you be eligible for some veterans benefits, aid and attendance in the future? You don't need them now, but you should know if that could be something to help you in the long run. And then under this pillar is also your financial documents or your legal documents, making sure that you have protected your wealth, your beneficiaries, going to an estate planning attorney and really identifying how best to, secure or, protect what you have is also really important under this pillar. And letting your support system know that you're, hey, I'm good now, but I'm looking at you maybe, are you okay with that?
yeah.
Um, And if you have your adult daughter who lives in a different state and she's going to be your support system and you have no plans on moving there ever, that's another reason that a professional support system might be able to be a buffer to help. Um, and I also believe in front loading services. So, people always get nervous. The geriatric care managers, $125 to $175 an hour. You should only use them for an hour at a time. They're not there all the time, but that's a service that will keep you independent because their job is to notice any deficits and help you get things in place in your world to keep you independent, even though you've had a deficit. If you did, if you did it without, you could decline, and all of a sudden you're paying a ton of money for, caregivers, where maybe we could hold that off a little bit by this person. And so the other piece of support system is listening to your support system. If
Ah,
your adult children are coming and trying to have talks with you, you've got to sit and listen and you've got to hear what they're saying and you can't get defensive and you've just got to hear that they love you, they care about you, and maybe their approach isn't the best, and I work on that on the other side with the adult children, but that means that they're trying to tell you something. And on the flip side, I hear a lot of times, I want to talk to my adult children, but they don't want to talk about it. They say, Mom, we're not talking about you dying. And you say, I don't care. This is my aging journey, and we're going to talk about it. And if that person can't hear you, are they the right support system
yeah.
for you?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the next pillar.
So the next pillar is social engagement, which we did touch on. And so social engagement is just being intentional about how are we going to get that need met as we age? And how are we doing it today? Today is a great indicator of what we're going to need in the future. And you can't rely on your adult children to be your social engagement. That's also not a fair thing to do. But also, if you're okay living in your house, maybe seeing your family come visit you once a week, and that is satisfying to you, great. That is no problem. But just knowing what you need out of social engagement is the first step. The third pillar is supportive services. So I identify these as anything where money is exchanged. So it could be insurance, like therapy, occupational therapy, speech, physical therapy, or private pay, caregivers, senior living, meal services, transportation. So understanding what resources are out there, how much they cost, how you pay for them. And when I work with my clients, we look at this, once we determine, hey, is your goal to stay home? Great. Well, here are the supportive services that may come your way in the future. And so let's talk about them. Let's talk about the costs. Let's talk about how you pay for them, how you can get the best out of them. Let's understand the business models. For example, a lot of people don't understand that home care companies require a minimum of time,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a reason for that. They can't find caregivers to go give you a shower in your house for 1 hour a day. That business model doesn't make sense. They would never find anyone to come. But on the flip side, if somebody's sitting on your couch because all their tasks are done and they're there for another 2 hours is going to drive you crazy, you need to think about that, and that, or if you're willing to move into a senior type community, 55 plus, you need to understand the different models. Why would you choose one over the other? What comes with those models? And so just getting an education on what may come your way from a business model service standpoint and how to pay for it. You may not be able to afford caregivers in your home past $5,000 a month. You should know that. So when caregivers become more than $5,000 a month, you already have a plan on what you're going to do. You've already chosen the independent living, the assisted living, whatever that you're going to go to. And the thing under supportive services that I write about in my book is identifying triggers. We've all worked with aging people who are very resistant to care, very resistant to hearing. And so as a family or as an aging individual, if we kind of identify triggers for ourselves, and triggers could be, like I said, money, more than 5,000. I know more than $5,000 a month. It doesn't make any more sense for me. That's a trigger. Driving can be a trigger. Once I'm not comfortable driving anymore, that's my trigger to go kind of research my next, or not research, you already know, but venture into my next. It could be your adult daughter saying, Mom, I can do 4 doctor's appointments a month. But after that, we've got to hire somebody to help you get to there because with my children, with my job, I just cannot do more than 4 a month. So just putting triggers in place that allow us to not get stuck in this, fog, and it easily helps us see, okay, this was the trigger. I hoped it never got to here, but it got here. And now we need to move to our next step. And then the last one, I always do this in quotes, is home. Home means, like we've talked about, a variety of things. But, if I work with a client and they are in the home that they've raised their children in and they've been there 40 years and it's a 3,500 square foot home, we're going to have big conversations, about, does this make sense for the future? And I hear a lot from people, oh, well, I don't have a mortgage. Yeah, but how much are you paying to upkeep this house? How old is the house? Is it going to need a new roof and AC? Are you paying for lawn care? What is it? Let's really compare that when you say that to really what you're spending to stay in this home. And where do you, if your support system, you've identified your support system and they're in another state, will you ever move there or will you not? Or I'll move there when a trigger happens, when I do need more support. And you've already kind of researched what's going on where they live. So it's just looking at where we are today, seeing if what's going on today makes the most sense for our aging journey, and then starting to just start thinking and being intentional about what we need to start thinking about and doing. With my clients, I work with independent, I always say like 75 and older is my ideal. 75 older, retired individuals who don't need to make any choices today. There's no choices to be made. It's just, hey, here's what's working. And here are the things that are going to come up and could potentially cause you to decline quick or to lose your independence. And let's be thoughtful about our plan, or I hate to use the word plan because everyone thinks it has to happen. Be thoughtful about what we want if these things start breaking down. How best to keep our independence.
Yeah, I love the whole talking about the triggers because we don't often spell that out, ahead of time. Like if it gets to this point, then, and with my dad's dementia, it's the kind of thing I wish I could have gone back before the dementia, and asked him in his clear, rational mind kind of things. And towards the end, we were kind of making guesses, Oh, dad, he wouldn't have wanted to been a burden, he kind of was relaying that anyhow. But yeah, just really being able to spell that out, okay, if it gets to this where I can't do this, then I need more support. And I think that would be a great kind of opener as like an adult child trying to speak with an aging parent. At what point do you see being still living here a challenge? Like finding out what those are so that you can have that kind of ahead of time. I think it would make it a much easier conversation when that happens to see, kind of be able to say, hey,
Yeah.
you said this, let's look at that now.
Yeah, because we're so reactive to aging. We're very
Yeah.
reactive. Something happens, then we research our options, we figure out what we want to do, but we're doing it in a place of not in our clearest mind, And so by just having these initial conversations that actually have substance to them, we're not doing, hey, mom, where do you want to retire? It's very like, okay, does this house really make sense long term? And
Yeah.
here are the reasons it doesn't. But here are the reasons that I can support you staying here. If you do this, like, or if we start talking about this, I can support you. And I also tell aging individuals who I speak to most often and who are my clients, like, if you went to your adult daughter and said, I want to stay home for as long as possible. And here's the plan or the things I put in place to make sure that that has happened, that I can do that. But if it gets to this point, I can either afford 24-hour care at home, and that is my goal, or I have already kind of thought about what I would potentially be okay with. And here is the list. So, what a gift you could give to your adult children to say, listen, I know that I'm aging. Duh. I really want to stay in this house. This is really my goal, but here's what I've been thoughtful about, and here's what I'm going to do, or here's what, I've read Allison's book, or, as long as they know you're not putting your head in the sand, that's all they want. And so
Yeah.
those conversations can start very organically. And most of the time, unfortunately, they come from the adult children. And I hope to start changing that and having more and more aging individuals say, hey, I want you to know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of giving them their power back to be
Yes.
to look and taking responsibility for it. Um, yeah, because otherwise, it's so much of it's reactionary. I see that every day. Something happens, and now we're in this situation, and now what? I'm actually putting together kind of a small book or a guide navigating hospital to rehab to home, because things happen like this and you've got to make these decisions. And part of it is understanding what's going on in the different, um,
Facilities.
well, yeah, in the different departments, and what they're thinking about this, and they're not thinking about all the other aspects. So being able to, I've helped a number of friends with, okay, mom needs rehab, what am I looking at
What does that
here?
mean? They're like, and what, and they don't know what the rules of rehab or what is rehab going to do? What, how much does Medicare cut? Like, there's so much. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's even the things that are misleading because, oh, Medicare will pay for 100 days. Well, that's not typically going to happen. The facility
Mhm.
doesn't want you there that many days
Mhm.
because there's a push for shorter lengths of stay, and
Burn
there's
and
all these other
churn.
factors
Yep.
in place that they don't always get the right information of what's happening. So yeah, I just love that your book kind of speaks to the retiring person and like, let's look at this ahead of time. Let's think through this.
And let's stay out of rehab. Let's stay
Yeah.
out of assisted living. I mean, we can do that. Most of the clients I meet, because we're meeting them so, early, we talk about, are you walking twice a day? Are you,
Mhm.
go get an
Yeah.
evaluation from a physical therapist just to get a baseline. Insurance, if you tell the doctor you tripped over your rug, because probably that's happened, they'll write you an order to get an
Sure.
evaluation, get 3 visits, get your baseline, and then work with a trainer, invest in a trainer. Mobility is your biggest asset, and you
Mhm.
need to invest in it. And we can stay out of, there's always going to be a time, a fall or something for some people that is going to put them in rehab. We can't predict all of it. A stroke, there's a lot of unpredictable, but you being proactive about your mobility and your health can keep you independent. And
Sure.
so a lot of times I come across people that just assume, that's sometimes where I get frustrated about some of the financial planning, and even the estate planning attorneys. Love them. Great. I have great connections with everyone, but they're basically saying like, oh, well, because you're going to end up in skilled or, long-term care, you got to protect your ass, you got to do everything. And I'm like, let's like make a goal of not getting there. Like, let's
Right.
do everything to like avoid that, you know? And I think it's so, as seeing it for 20 years, I do believe we can really be very proactive to keep ourselves out of it. I do.
Sure. Sure. I mean, not only our physical health, but in some ways our cognitive health, because I mean, COVID was a big example of that. My dad's cognition went downhill fast
Yeah.
from the deprivation of activity and being able to engage in the things that he loved, and just knowing, I mean, research has shown that how important it is engaging our mind in activities to maintain that. Because some people think, oh, I'm going to get old and I'm going to fall. They kind of, "Oh, this is what it looks like when you get
I
old."
know it's like a
Well,
resignation to aging, which is what I hate. I hate that. I'm like, no. And going back to the cognition too, I am one of the things about being proactive with your aging, I always tell people stagnation is one of the worst things you can do for your cognitive health. Moving is so good for your cognitive health, doing the whole downsizing process, moving to a new place, meeting new people, learning a new grocery store. Like I tell my audiences all the time, like anything you could do to fire your neurons in a different way. I hear a
Mhm.
lot, oh, I do crosswords every day. Well, that's great, but it's still working one part of your brain. We're, excuse me, we're trying to work many parts of our brain and fire them up in new ways. Um, but going back to that as well is if you are having concerns about your cognition, if there are concerns about your mobility, your balance is off, you're shaky, you shouldn't hide it and pretend and wait for someone to notice. Right away, you should be going to your doctor and saying, listen, I'm having trouble. I think I'm repeating myself or something's not right. And this goes back to taking away the shame because the earlier we get these diagnoses, the sooner we can implement. I know as a occupational therapist, implement some interventions that can be
Mhm.
so effective to keeping us independent and slowing the process of both of those declines. And that's a big piece of what I talk about is we've got to be honest. I had a client and she has aphasia.
Mhm.
And aphasia is such a hard thing because your brain's not necessarily affected, but you can't, I mean, it is affected. You have aphasia, but from a cognitive level, people presume you are having cognition issues because of your aphasia. And she was moving into a senior community and she was which a great choice for her because of her diagnosis. She needed a support system around her as she ages. And I told her, I said, this is going to be hard, but you need to tell your new neighbors that you have aphasia. Because when you're not trying to hide it, her speech was actually it was better because she wasn't so concerned about it. And I said, they will embrace you. They will the more open we are with our struggles in aging, first of all, everybody's going through them. So it's very relatable to our peers. They're also going through it. So if we're the one that is a catalyst for open conversation and open dialogue about our struggles, it just creates an environment where we can all thrive even with our deficits because it's a welcoming, we're accepting, we're understanding.
Mhm.
I don't know if she did, but that is, being open and honest about our aging struggles is the best way to keep our independence for longer and keep control.
It's so true. It makes me think of when my parents still lived in the 55 plus community. As my dad's dementia was developing, he was still going to participate in poker. My mom would take him there, and the people had known him for a while, and he's very much a people person. He loved being around them. And, I remember one time I went to pick him up and his jacket was lost and everyone was looking for it. And so they kind of looked out for him. They
Yeah.
enjoyed playing. They played for small change, but the people would tell my mom, "Oh, I feel bad taking his money," but it's like he enjoyed going and playing the game. It
Yes.
wasn't
That was
about
part of it.
the money,
Yeah.
and just that that he was honest with people about his Parkinson's, and he also got diagnosed way earlier than I've ever seen anyone diagnosed. Like I was surprised because usually. I can see that people have Parkinson's and they maybe aren't even diagnosed yet because it's not something that can be diagnosed with a test. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it did make a huge difference. I mean, the first, 12 years of that or more, no one knew he had Parkinson's. It did
Mm-hmm.
make a huge difference in his maintaining his independence for quite a long time. So yeah, you can't oversay that enough as far as to be the proactive. I'm going to call my mom again because she's like, I'm having some balance issues. And she does all the exercise classes. I'm like, you can get physical therapy. It can be
Yeah.
100% paid for. It's right there in the building. They
Yeah.
have
And
it.
they'll give you different exercises that are specific for you.
Right, right. Because you want to do that now, not because you fell.
Yes.
The
And not hiding
preventative.
falls. That's another thing. A lot of people hide
Oh.
falls or hide any of this aging things. And I understand it. I'm speaking like I get it. But I've also worked around thousands of aging people. So I know the emotional struggles of it as well. And
Hmm.
but hiding it is the worst thing. You know, if we have a fall, if we have concerns about cognition, it should start a process of not services where you're paying a ton of money, but, you know, just starting a protocol, if you will, of things that we need to be ahead of, on top of, or thoughtful of.
Yeah, kind of like relooking at things. There
Yep.
was a couple I worked with in a community, and they were in the independent living, even though it was getting to the point where how are they still living here? And they would have, she would fall, but they wouldn't call it a fall. She didn't really fall, you know. It's like if
Kind
you
of trick.
wind up on the floor and you
Yeah.
can't
You
get
can't
back
get up.
up,
Yeah. Doesn't matter
and
how you got there.
they get so defensive about it. And it was like, I mean, they called the
Yeah.
fire department even to come get her up. She was a larger woman, you know, but it's like, yeah, this is not continuing to be independent living. And but people are funny about things. And you know, so I just, yeah, I'm hopeful that maybe the younger generations as we're aging will be a little more open in discussing these
Well,
things.
and even these stories you're telling, this generation was a little traumatized by mom and dad because they didn't do anything. So they are more willing to talk about it. They
Sure.
are more willing to be open and honest about it, because a lot of your generation, the baby boom generation, what had really hard struggles with mom and dad, and they
Yeah.
just don't want that for their children.
Yeah, I guess I've already started the conversation. My dad, for a while, when he was still at home with mom, was going to a like an adult daycare, and it was
Mhm.
Montessori based. It was for
Mhm.
specific memory care issues. And I tell my kids, I want to come here. Like, I love this setup.
Yeah.
You get stations of what you want to work on, and it's very self-directed.
Social recreator.
And my kids are just, they don't want to think about that. They're pretty young, you know, or in their 20s and the teenager.
Oh, I've already called them for you, Gina.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the wait list.
You're on the wait list. Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. It's just
It
so
really
much,
is,
you
Allison. You've
know.
shared, and your book, you know, we're definitely going to share the link to that.
Yeah.
Because it is powerful, and I love that idea of, because there's so many things that are targeted at the caregiver, but
Yes.
let's look at, be proactive. We're all aging, right? The only other option is that we're not here anymore.
And
We
that
Yeah,
are,
truly
came close
is.
enough to that too. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And really, it came because I was so ingrained with aging individuals for 20 years. You know,
Mhm.
that's
Mm,
my heart, is why, you know, supporting aging individuals. You know, of course I love the adult children. I had great relationships with them, but yeah, I really have this, you know, affinity for, we can live life in the best way possible. We just have to
Mhm.
be proactive. So yeah.
Mhm.
So what, maybe you could give just a tip for somebody that's maybe that's one to be early in doing this, but some kind of tip that you give maybe your clients or whatever.
Yeah. So, truly, the first thing is becoming self aware. We have to understand that aging is universal, but our aging journey is 100% unique to us. And so, you can't, if your neighbor down the street has the, you know, the wait list deposit at the CCRC and continuing care retirement community, and in your heart you just don't feel like that's the right thing, that's okay. Let her aging journey be. And it goes the same way if, just because you have a friend who had a terrible experience with home care with her parents, doesn't mean home care is going to be bad for you.
Yeah.
So this is a very individualized journey. And so educating yourself on your own individualized goals, desires, and what will work for you and what won't work for you is really important. And, you know, of course, commiserating and talking to all your friends and, you know, sharing resources, sharing conversation. But just know that because something didn't work for somebody else doesn't mean it won't work for you. And just because it worked for you, you know, it goes back to kind of like parenting advice. You know, I have teenagers, so I can't tell, you know, my sister who has toddlers, you know, anything, you know, because she's in the
Yeah.
worst part of
Yeah.
parenting. I'm in the worst part of parenting. Well, it's the same thing with aging. You know, everybody's situation is, and you've got to just own your own, be
Mhm.
aware of your own, and live it with intention, and, you know, be thoughtful about your future.
Sure.
And how, if you don't mind, just we can mention it here. We'll also put it on the description. But how can they find your book? How can they find your
Yeah.
foundation?
So you look up Openly Aging, and openlyaging.com is my website, all my socials, Instagram, Facebook. My book is on Amazon, Openly Aging, the 4 pillars to keep control of your aging journey. And I work one-on-one with clients, with families, and we basically dive into their 4 pillars. So I do it kind of in a package. A lot of times 2 or 4 sessions is enough for somebody to kind of get started on their journey. And so, I offer a complimentary consultation if anybody wants to just speak a little further about their specific situation. And I work with clients nationally because I look at big picture and all the services are the same in every state.
Yeah, and with features like Zoom and things, it's easy to
Yes,
consult with people at a distance.
yes,
And
yes.
that's becoming such a common thing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today,
Thank
Allison.
you. Well, I appreciate you all having me.
So that's our podcast for today, and we hope you really enjoyed it. We'd love to hear your comments. You can leave us a comment, you can do a like, you can do a subscribe anywhere that you're doing it. You can find out about our consulting stuff that Gina does with people, just the same with what Allison does and what she has to do. And then you can also find out about, we have Ask OT, which is going to be coming out really soon, where we've got some small snippets of videos telling people how to do some different things of getting around the house, getting through the different things they might need for their journey. Each week I do a EFT tapping session to help people bring down their anxieties. And you can find that out by doing focushealthyfamily.com/EFT-group. Um, and you can find everything you find about us at focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can find us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family. You can find us on Instagram at Focused Healthy Family 1 and YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. And you can see our podcast every Thursday. We put out our podcast. You can check out the archives of ones we've done in the past. And you can find all that on focusedhealthyfamilypodcast.com. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.